They called my name over the loudspeaker loud enough to make every cadet turn. In front of the entire unit, I, Emily Harper, was handed a sealed envelope and told to exit the lineup. No reason. No explanation. Just the cold precision of institutional rejection. Someone laughed. Someone else muttered, "Guess the farmer's daughter couldn't keep up." I said nothing. I just walked away, my short-cropped blonde hair ruffling in the breeze as I stood alone on the tarmac watching the other cadets perform their drills in the distance. At 28, I was older than most of the recruits, with sharp green eyes that missed nothing and a quiet demeanor that had made me an easy target. The wind carried fragments of laughter from a group of younger cadets, all from military families, all sailing through evaluations with suspiciously consistent scores. Captain Bradley Thornton approached, his chiseled features arranged in an expression of professional regret that didn't reach his icy blue eyes. "We've reviewed your performance matrix," he stated, voice clinically detached. "It doesn't meet criteria for tactical decisions under high-stress response." His tone was reasonable, his words following protocol perfectly, yet the satisfaction lurking beneath his perfect composure was unmistakable to me. The sun was setting now, casting an orange glow across the hangars and runways. I touched the tarnished silver wing pin fastened to the inside of my jacket. My father's pin, the only thing I had left of him after the crash that took his life 3 years ago. I ran my thumb over the worn edges, feeling the slight indentation where his name had once been etched before years of handling had smoothed it away. John Coleman Harper hadn't been just any crop duster. He'd been a legend in our small community, known for his precision flying and mechanical genius. Local pilots would divert miles out of their way to have him check their engines, trusting his instincts more than manufacturer manuals. "You've got the touch, Sparrow," he told me the first time I'd taken the controls of his old biplane at the age of 12. "It's in your blood." The memory both comforted and stung. I'd promised him I would fly someday. Really fly, not just dust fields. Now that promise lay shattered at my feet, another casualty of a system that valued pedigree over skill. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice the approach of Tech Sergeant Danny Brooks, until his gravelly voice broke through my reverie. "Rough day, kid." The 40-year-old mechanic had grease smudged across his forearm and compassion in his eyes. His weathered hands bore the marks of decades working with aircraft. Scarred knuckles, oil embedded in the creases of his skin, fingernails permanently darkened from hydraulic fluid. Unlike most at the academy, Danny had never treated me with disdain. I'd often found refuge in the maintenance hangar, my mechanical aptitude earning me a modicum of respect from the veteran technician. "Just got my walking papers," I replied, keeping my voice steady with practiced control. Apparently my tactical response profile doesn't meet standards. The bitter words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I refused to let my disappointment show. Danny's weathered face hardened. "Thornton's work, I'm guessing. The same way your gyro stabilizer mysteriously recalibrated mid-simulation yesterday." The unexpected insight caught me off guard. For weeks, I'd performed flawlessly in simulations and maintenance tests, only to face inexplicable equipment issues during critical evaluations. There had always been some documented reason. Calibration drift, software patches, sensor anomalies, all perfectly timed to undermine my performance. "Doesn't matter now," I said, turning to walk toward the base exit. "I've got 48 hours to clear out." Danny stepped into my path, his expression suddenly intense. "Hold up. You're just going to walk away? Let Thornton win." My jaw tightened. "I fought every day I was here, Sergeant. They've made their decision." Danny glanced around to ensure we weren't overheard, then leaned closer. "What if I told you there might be a way to show them exactly what they're throwing away?" There was something in Danny's tone that made me pause, a conspiratorial edge that kindled a dangerous spark of hope. "I'm listening," I said cautiously. Danny nodded toward the maintenance hangar. "Walk with me." As we moved across the tarmac, The older man spoke in low, urgent tones. 3 days from now, there's going to be a demonstration for some big brass from Washington. A showcase of the program's best pilots. Thornton's the star attraction, of course, showing off in the new F-22 they just brought in for testing. My eyes widened. The Raptor was the Air Force's premier fighter, a technological marvel that few pilots ever got to handle. What's that got to do with me? I asked, though a wild idea was already forming in my mind. Danny's eyes glinted with mischief and determination. I've been watching you, Harper. You've got skills these silver spoon flyboys couldn't touch with a decade of training. It's in your instincts, the way you handle every machine you touch. He paused at the hangar entrance, turning to face me fully. Your father and I served together for 8 years before the incident that grounded him. I was there when they falsified the systems report, called it pilot error, when the real error was Thornton's manipulated flight data. I felt a jolt as Danny's gaze flicked momentarily to the barely visible edge of my father's pin. You've got 3 days, he continued. 3 days to prove what you can do. And I know how you can do it. But it's risky. Career ending for me. Possibly worse for you. That night, the simulator hummed to life under my touch, its controls familiar yet thrillingly different from anything I'd officially trained on at the academy. Danny stood watch at the hangar door as I settled into the pilot's seat, my heart racing with equal parts fear and exhilaration. The soft blue glow of the instrument panels illuminated my face, casting shadows that accentuated my determined expression. My fingers moved across the startup sequence with practiced precision, each switch and dial responding to my touch as if welcoming me home. You've got 2 hours, he told me. Make them count. As the screens illuminated around me, I closed my eyes for just a moment, allowing myself to be transported back to a different time. To golden wheat fields stretching to the horizon and the rickety old biplane that had been my first classroom. My father's voice seemed to whisper in my ear. Feel the aircraft, Sparrow. Don't just fly it, become it. The memories flooded back with startling clarity. John Harper had been more than just my father. He'd been my mentor, my champion, and my first glimpse into a world beyond our small farm. A former military pilot himself before an injury had grounded him permanently, he'd turned to crop dusting to stay in the sky. On my 12th birthday, instead of the doll or bicycle other girls might have received, John had led his daughter to the small airstrip behind their property and hoisted me into the cockpit of his weathered yellow biplane. I remembered the smell of aviation fuel mingling with the earthy scent of freshly turned soil, the leather seat cracked and worn smooth from years of use, the control stick fitting my small hand as if it had been made for me. Time you learned the family business, he'd said with a wink. The simulator program Danny had selected was no beginner's course. It was the advanced combat training module reserved for final stage cadets. If I could master this, I could fly anything. For the next 2 hours, I lost myself in the virtual sky. The first few attempts were rough, the F-22's responsiveness catching me off guard after months of training on less sophisticated aircraft. 3 times I crashed during high-speed maneuvers, the simulator flashing red with failure notifications. But with each simulation, each virtual mission, my hands grew more confident on the controls. My instincts, honed through years of unauthorized flying over Kansas farmland, began to assert themselves. The 4th attempt showed marked improvement. By the 6th, I was outperforming the program benchmarks. What the Academy instructors had dismissed as unorthodox technique was in reality the mark of a natural pilot who understood flight on an intuitive level. When the simulated F-22 experienced a catastrophic hydraulic failure at Mach 1, I instinctively executed a sequence of adjustments that not only stabilized the aircraft, but maintained mission parameters. By the time Danny returned to warn me that security would be making rounds soon, I had completed 3 combat scenarios with scores that would have placed me at the top of any class. I told you, Danny said with quiet satisfaction as I reluctantly powered down the simulator. The security logs would show only routine maintenance checks, thanks to his careful preparation. You've got the touch, just like your father. John could feel an aircraft's limits better than anyone I ever knew. Before Thornton made sure he'd never fly military again. I glanced at the hidden wing pin inside my jacket. Why didn't you tell me you knew him so well? Danny's expression grew somber. Watching your old friend's reputation get destroyed does something to a man. I tried to fight it back then and got nowhere. The system closed ranks around Thornton, the golden boy with the right connections. But seeing you fly now, it's like history giving us a second chance. Our conversation was cut short by the sound of footsteps approaching the hangar. We've got to move, he whispered urgently, guiding me toward a side exit. Security. As we slipped out into the night, I realized we'd left the simulator running. A security camera mounted in the corner of the hangar blinked silently, its red light a silent witness to my unauthorized session. Danny noticed it too late. Damn it, he muttered. Someone's going to see that footage. I felt a chill of dread. What happens now? I asked, knowing that whatever slim chance I had of proving myself had likely just evaporated. But Danny's expression was calculating rather than defeated. Now we accelerate the plan. You've got 72 hours to prove what you can do, and someone just saw you do it. Question is, who and what will they do about it? The morning after my simulator session, I awoke to an urgent knock on my dormitory door. Throwing on a t-shirt and sweatpants, I opened it to find Lieutenant Mia Alvarez standing in the hallway, her dark eyes unreadable. At 30, Alvarez was one of the few female instructors at the academy and known for her tough but fair approach. She was also, I noted with a sinking feeling, the head of security operations. Harper, Alvarez said crisply. Get dressed and meet me at Hangar 6 in 15 minutes. Don't talk to anyone on your way there. Before I could respond, the lieutenant turned and strode away, leaving me standing barefoot and confused in the doorway. So this was it. They discovered the unauthorized simulator use, and now I was about to face the consequences. I dressed quickly, my mind racing through possible scenarios, none of them good. Best case, I'd simply be escorted off the base immediately rather than having the 48 hours I'd been granted to pack my things. Worst case, there would be legal repercussions, possibly affecting Danny as well. The thought of the grizzled mechanic facing disciplinary action because of me made my stomach twist with guilt. As I made my way across the grounds toward Hangar 6, a smaller facility used primarily for equipment storage, I kept my eyes forward, avoiding the curious glances of passing cadets. Word of my dismissal had spread quickly, and I had no desire to fuel the gossip mill further. Lieutenant Alvarez was waiting inside the hangar, standing beside a top-covered piece of equipment that I immediately recognized as the simulator from the night before. My heart sank. There was no denying my actions now. Close the door, Alvarez instructed, her tone giving away nothing. I complied, then stood at attention, bracing myself for what was to come. To my surprise, instead of beginning a reprimand, Alvarez walked to a control panel on the wall and pressed several buttons. Security cameras in the corners of the hangar powered down with soft beeps. We have exactly 7 minutes before the system automatically reactivates, the lieutenant said, turning back to face me. That should be enough time for you to explain why you were using a restricted simulator after hours, and why your performance metrics broke 3 academy records. I blinked, momentarily stunned. This wasn't the conversation I'd expected. You saw the footage? Alvarez nodded, a hint of impatience crossing her features. I monitor all security alerts personally. Imagine my surprise when I saw a supposedly super cadet, one who'd just been dismissed from the program, handling complex combat scenarios with more skill than most of our graduating class. So I'll ask again, explain. I hesitated, weighing my options. Lying would be pointless. The evidence was literally right beside us. But the truth implicated Danny, whose career was on the line. As if reading my thoughts, Alvarez added, and before you try to protect Brooks, don't bother. I know he helped you access the system. What I want to know is why. Taking a deep breath, I made my decision. Because Captain Thornton's assessment of my abilities was wrong, I said, meeting Alvarez's gaze directly. I've been flying since I was 12 years old. My father was John Harper, a military pilot before he was injured. He taught me everything he knew. My voice grew stronger as I continued, fueled by months of suppressed frustration. But from day one, something always went wrong during my evaluations. Equipment malfunctions, calibration issues, all conveniently timed and never thoroughly investigated. I used the simulator because I wanted proof for myself, if no one else, that I deserved to be here. Sergeant Brooks just gave me the chance to show what I can really do without interference. Alvarez's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, or understanding. The lieutenant had faced her own battles in the male-dominated world of military aviation. Rumors of her clashes with the old guard were well known among the cadets. "That's a serious accusation, Harper," she said after a moment. "Manipulating evaluation systems is grounds for court-martial." I squared my shoulders. I know what I'm saying, and I know the risks. Alvarez studied me for a long moment, then glanced at her watch. 3 minutes left. "So what exactly was your plan?" "Break into the simulator, prove you can fly, then what?" "The dismissal order is already filed." "I don't know," I admitted, the brief surge of defiance fading. "It was stupid and impulsive. I just couldn't walk away without trying." To my surprise, Alvarez's stern expression softened fractionally. "No, it wasn't stupid. Reckless, maybe, but not stupid." The lieutenant moved to the simulator and pulled back the top completely, revealing the sophisticated equipment beneath. "You know what this is scheduled for, right? The demonstration for the Pentagon officials this Friday." Thornton's big moment in the spotlight. I nodded. Danny had mentioned the showcase. "What if," Alvarez said slowly, "instead of leaving the base quietly, you showed the brass exactly what kind of talent Thornton is pushing out the door?" As the security cameras hummed back to life, Alvarez stepped back, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. "You're restricted to base until your discharge is finalized, Harper," she said loudly for the benefit of any monitoring systems. "I'll expect you to comply with all protocols during your remaining time here." With that, the lieutenant strode to the door, pausing only briefly to add, "Walsh uses access code 472ALLMA for his sessions. He's notoriously forgetful about logging out properly." And then she was gone, leaving me standing alone in the hangar, my mind reeling with possibilities that had seemed impossible just minutes before. That night, as I slipped into the simulator using Walsh's credentials, I was startled by movement in the shadows. Cadet Ethan Walsh himself stepped forward, his handsome face unreadable. "Figured I'd find you here," he said quietly. I tensed, ready to defend myself, but Walsh made no move to sound an alarm. "Thornton assigned me to watch you," he admitted, surprising me with his candor. "Said you might try something before leaving. Told me to record anything suspicious." He held up a small device, a voice recorder, then deliberately switched it off. I regarded him warily. "Why are you telling me this?" Walsh hesitated, then gestured to the simulator. "Last week, I watched you diagnose and fix a lateral stability issue in the Mark V simulator that 3 instructors couldn't solve. Then your evaluation suddenly showed you failing to comprehend basic stability principles." He shook his head, genuine confusion in his eyes. "It doesn't add up." Moving closer, he observed the screen displaying my last simulation scores. "I've been trying to nail that inverted descent for weeks," he said, nodding toward the completed scenario statistics. "Thornton says it's essential for the demonstration on Friday, but I can't seem to get the timing right." For the next hour, we worked together, me guiding Walsh through the maneuver. As we trained, Walsh revealed more. "Thornton's been altering your evaluation scores. I've seen him do it." And then the bombshell. the F-22 for Friday's demonstration. It's designated FX-97, with the call sign Coleman painted on the side. I froze, recognizing my father's call sign. Walsh explained that Thornton had specifically requested that aircraft, mentioning poetic justice and closing a circle. As we finished the session, Walsh's expression had changed from skepticism to quiet respect. "I don't know what they see when they look at you," he said, shutting down the simulator. "But I see someone who flies like she belongs." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of clandestine meetings and late-night simulator sessions. Emily, Alvarez, Danny, and Walsh formed an unlikely alliance, each bringing unique skills and knowledge to their hastily constructed plan. During the day, I maintained the pretense of preparing to leave the base, packing my meager belongings and completing discharge paperwork with a resignation that fooled all but the most observant eyes. But at night, I transformed into the pilot I was born to be, spending hours in the simulator with Walsh's access code, mastering the F-22's complex systems and pushing its virtual capabilities to their limits. "You're a natural," Danny observed during one such session, his gruff voice softened with something like paternal pride. "Just like your old man." Lieutenant Alvarez proved to be a formidable strategist, using her position as head of security to monitor Thornton's movements and communications without raising suspicion. It was Alvarez who discovered that the captain had scheduled a private inspection of the F-97, the Coleman, the night before the demonstration. "He's going to do a final check of all systems," she reported during our meeting in a rarely used storage facility. "Standard procedure, but it gives him ample opportunity to make any adjustments he might want to ensure the aircraft performs to his specifications." The implication hung heavy in the air. If Thornton had been willing to manipulate evaluation systems to keep me out of the program, what might he do to guarantee his own success during the highest-profile flight of his career? "You think he'd tamper with the aircraft?" Walsh asked, his voice hushed despite the privacy of their location. He had been the most reluctant member of our conspiracy at first, years of conditioned loyalty to Thornton warring with his newfound conscience. But with each revelation of the captain's ethical compromises, Walsh's resolve had strengthened. "Not directly," Danny replied, his eyes hard with accumulated knowledge of military politics. "Thornton's too smart for that. But he might make subtle optimizations. Tweaks to the responsiveness, adjustments to the control surfaces. Nothing that would register as sabotage, but enough to give him an edge during the demonstration." I frowned, considering the implications. Could those same optimizations be used against him? I asked, an idea beginning to form. Danny's slow smile was answer enough. "The plan we ultimately devised was audacious, requiring split-second timing and flawless execution. Alvarez would ensure my continued access to the base, despite my official dismissal, while Walsh would serve as our eyes and ears within Thornton's inner circle. Danny's role was perhaps the most crucial and the most dangerous. As chief maintenance technician, he would be present during Thornton's inspection of the aircraft. "I can't stop him from making his adjustments," Danny explained, "but I can document them. And more importantly, I can ensure they're not as effective as he thinks they'll be." The risk was enormous. If caught, Danny faced not just dismissal, but potential criminal charges. Yet the old mechanic seemed almost cheerful about the prospect. "Some things are worth the risk," he said when I expressed concern. "Your father would have done the same for me. Getting me from the barracks to the aircraft would require navigating multiple security checkpoints. This will get you past level 2, Alvarez said, handing me a forged security badge. After that, you're on your own." Walsh provided a maintenance schedule showing a gap in hangar surveillance between 13:45 and 14:05, our window of opportunity. "There's just one problem," he warned. "You'll have to cross the main terminal corridor at peak changeover. If anyone recognizes you." The implications were clear. I would be on my own, deep in restricted territory, with no plausible explanation for my presence. The night before the demonstration, our plan was set in motion. Walsh reported that Thornton was more agitated than usual, snapping at cadets and obsessively reviewing the flight patterns for the 100th time. "He's nervous," Walsh observed with some surprise. "I've never seen him like this before." I understood the pressure all too well. The Pentagon officials attending the demonstration weren't just evaluating the aircraft. They were assessing the future leadership of the Air Force's elite training programs. For Thornton, the stakes couldn't be higher, which made him both predictable and dangerous. As darkness fell over the base, I made my way to a predetermined observation point near the maintenance hangar where I could watch Thornton's inspection without being seen. What I witnessed over the next 2 hours confirmed our suspicions. Thornton moved methodically around the aircraft, occasionally conferring with Danny or consulting a tablet he carried. At several points, he directed the mechanic to make subtle adjustments to various components. Nothing dramatic, but enough to customize the aircraft's performance to his specific preferences. Midway through the inspection, Danny clutched his side suddenly, face contorting in apparent pain. "Old injury," he gasped to Thornton. "Need a minute." The distraction gave Danny crucial moments alone with the aircraft's diagnostic system. Enough time to document the changes and implement subtle countermeasures. When Thornton finally departed, looking satisfied with his preparations, I remained hidden until Danny emerged from the hangar alone. The mechanic didn't approach my hiding spot directly. Instead, he made a show of locking up the facility and heading toward his quarters. Only when he passed near my position did he drop a small object that glinted in the moonlight. A data drive containing the documentation of Thornton's optimizations. What I couldn't know was that at that very moment, Thornton was reviewing security footage in his office, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand and a troubled expression on his face. Despite our precautions, something had triggered his suspicion. Perhaps a pattern in Walsh's movements or an inconsistency in the base's security logs. The captain rewound the footage, studying it with narrowed eyes, searching for confirmation of the unease that had been growing in him for days. When he finally found what he was looking for, a brief glimpse of me entering a restricted area during hours when I should have been confined to my quarters, his handsome face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Not this time, Harper," he murmured, reaching for his phone. "Not on my watch." The day of the demonstration dawned clear and bright. Perfect flying weather. I awoke before sunrise, mentally reviewing our plan one final time. The window of opportunity would be narrow, barely 3 minutes to move from maintenance access to the runway without being detected. Our conspiracy hinged on precise timing and the assumption that Thornton, confident in his position, wouldn't anticipate our move until too late. Thanks to Danny's documentation, we knew exactly what optimizations the captain had made to the FX-97. Subtle adjustments to the throttle response and control surfaces for an edge during complex maneuvers. What Thornton didn't know was that Danny had implemented countermeasures, restoring the aircraft's factory settings in ways undetectable during pre-flight check. At noon, I met with my co-conspirators in our unofficial headquarters. Danny looked exhausted but determined. Dark circles ringed his eyes from a night spent meticulously calibrating sensors to mask his modifications to the aircraft. "The Coleman is ready," he reported, using my father's call sign with reverence. Thornton completed his pre-flight check an hour ago. Everything's exactly as it should be, which means nothing is as he expects it to be. Lieutenant Alvarez frowned, checking her watch. "There's a problem. Security rotation changed. I'm assigned to the VIP section. I won't be able to clear your path as planned." She handed me a security badge with my photo but a different name. "This will get you past level 2. After that, you're on your own." Danny pulled me aside, pressing something small and metallic into my palm. "Your father would want you to have this today," he said gruffly. I opened my hand to find a set of pilot's wings. Not the tarnished pin I'd carried for years, but a gleaming official set inscribed with John Coleman Harper's name and service number. He earned these, Danny explained, emotion thick in his voice. Kept them even after everything. Found them in his personal effects after the crash. I closed my fingers around the wings too moved to speak. This was more than a keepsake. It was a tangible connection to my father's legitimate service, a reminder of what had been taken from him and what I was fighting to reclaim. At 1400 hours, Thornton and his team took to the sky. I watched as the sleek F-22s roared down the runway and climbed into the perfect blue expanse. Even from a distance, I could identify the Coleman by its distinctive markings, my father's aircraft, flown by the man who had destroyed his career. For 15 minutes, I observed as Thornton led his team through impressive maneuvers, showcasing the Raptor's capability. It was, I had to admit, a masterful display. Whatever else Thornton might be, he was undeniably skilled. But skill without integrity was like an aircraft without a soul. Technically proficient, but lacking the human element that transformed mere flying into something transcendent. At 1440 hours, my community crackled with Walsh's voice. He's setting up for the inverted descent now. Stand by. My heart pounded as I watched Thornton's aircraft, my father's aircraft, climbing to the altitude required for the maneuver. This was the moment everything hinged on. The window that would either open or close forever in the next 60 seconds. Now, Walsh's voice came again. Maintenance alert triggered. You have approximately 2 minutes. I moved swiftly through the maintenance corridor, only to freeze as a security officer rounded the corner. His hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Ma'am, this area is restricted during demonstrations, he called. Without missing a beat, I knelt by an exposed junction box. Signal calibration check, I replied, gesturing to the wires. Towers getting interference from the east sector. I pulled a multimeter from my pocket, a detail Danny had insisted on for authenticity. The technical jargon and my confident tone worked. The officer nodded and continued his patrol. Heart hammering, I resumed my path to the runway where the Stanby Raptor waited. As I approached the cockpit, I felt a moment of pure clarity, a certainty that transcended fear or doubt. This was what I had been born to do. My hands moved over the controls with confident precision, bringing the sophisticated jet to life. Tower, this is FX-93 requesting emergency takeoff clearance, I transmitted. A confused voice responded. FX-93, there's no scheduled emergency takeoff. Please identify pilot and authorization code. Tower, this is Emily Harper, call sign Sparrow. Authorization code Coleman 739er. Security protocol override. Static crackled across the radio, followed by a suspicious voice. FX-93, stand by for verification. My stomach dropped. This wasn't part of the plan. The override should have worked automatically. Just as I prepared to abort, a burst of electronic interference hit the tower's communication system. Danny's final contribution. When the system reset, only the automated protocols remained active. FX-93, you are cleared for emergency takeoff on runway 3, came the computerized response. I engaged the throttle, feeling the immense power of the Raptor surge through the airframe. The force pressed me back into the seat as the aircraft lifted off, climbing rapidly into the sky that had called to me since childhood. Far above, Thornton was just completing the inverted descent that formed the centerpiece of his demonstration. Through my radio, I could hear the appreciative murmurs of the control tower as they monitored his flawless execution. What they couldn't see, what only Danny knew for certain, was that the Coleman was responding differently than Thornton had expected. The subtle changes Danny had made were forcing the captain to compensate continuously, taxing his skills to maintain the appearance of effortless control. It was at this precise moment, as Thornton leveled out from the maneuver, that my aircraft appeared on his radar. Tower, I'm picking up an unscheduled aircraft in the demonstration airspace, came his sharp voice over the comm. Please confirm and advise. The confusion that followed was exactly what we had counted on. As controllers scrambled to identify the intruder and Thornton's team responded to the unexpected development, I seized my moment. With fluid grace, I maneuvered my Raptor into the formation, positioning myself directly alongside the Coleman. Through the canopies of our respective aircraft, separated by mere meters of empty space, Thornton and I locked eyes for a brief, electric moment. I saw the instant recognition dawn in his face, followed by disbelief and then fury. His lips moved in what I imagined was a curse, but the roar of the engine swallowed the sound. In response, I simply tapped my father's wings, now proudly displayed on my flight suit, and gave Thornton a small, knowing smile. What happened next unfolded with the inevitability of destiny. Thornton, enraged by my intrusion and destabilized by the unexpected response of his aircraft, attempted an aggressive maneuver to reassert control of the situation. But the Coleman, restored to factory settings by Danny's careful work, didn't respond as Thornton anticipated. The slight overcorrection sent the F-22 into the beginning of a spin, not catastrophic, but definitely not part of the planned demonstration. I felt the gravitational forces pulling at my own body as I watched the Coleman begin its uncontrolled rotation, knew the disorientation Thornton must be experiencing as the horizon spun sickeningly around him. For a moment, I hesitated. The man had systematically destroyed my career, had been responsible for my father's downfall. Justice demanded I let him fail spectacularly before the Pentagon officials and his own superiors. But something deeper than vengeance guided my hands as I keyed my radio. Coleman, reduce throttle to 40% and ease your stick 2 degrees port. I transmitted calmly, using the precise adjustment needed to counter the spin. You're fighting factory settings, not your modifications. There was a moment of stunned silence. Thornton struggling with both his aircraft and his pride, before I saw the Coleman begin to stabilize. Even now, I won't let your ego kill you, I murmured to myself before breaking formation and executing a perfect roll that positioned my aircraft above Thornton's, clearly visible to the observers below. Then, with the precision my father had instilled in me from my first flight, I demonstrated the correct recovery technique, my Raptor moving with fluid grace through the exact sequence of adjustments that Thornton had been struggling to implement. Tower, this is F-22, I transmitted, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Captain Thornton appears to be experiencing control issues with the Coleman, requesting permission to complete the demonstration sequence while he recovers. There was a long pause, long enough for me to wonder if I had miscalculated, if my gamble would end with military police waiting when I landed. Then, to my astonishment, a new voice came over the comm, deep, authoritative, and undeniably amused. This is General Michaels, Pentagon Oversight Committee. Permission granted, FX-93. Let's see what you can do. I felt a surge of elation as I acknowledged the transmission. This was it, my one chance to show the world, and myself, exactly what John Harper's daughter was capable of. For the next 10 minutes, I put the Raptor through maneuvers that combined textbook precision with the intuitive flair I'd developed over years of unauthorized flying. Below, the assembled dignitaries and base personnel watched in amazement as an unscheduled pilot outperformed the Academy's star instructor with apparent ease. Through it all, I maintained a perfect awareness of Thornton's position, noting with grim satisfaction that he had managed to stabilize the Coleman but made no attempt to interfere with my impromptu display. As I completed the final sequence, a technically challenging combination that I executed flawlessly, I keyed my radio once more. This is Emily Harper, call sign Sparrow, requesting landing clearance. And if it pleases the tower, I'd like to dedicate this flight to my father, John Coleman Harper, the finest pilot I've ever known. The request was met with a moment of stunned silence, followed by General Michaels' voice again. Landing clearance granted, Sparrow. And the tower acknowledges your dedication. As I guided my aircraft back toward the runway, I felt a weight lifting, years of suppressed grief and frustrated ambition releasing their hold on my heart. Whatever happened next, court-martial, disgrace, or vindication, I had honored my father and the sky they both loved. The raptor responded to my touch like an extension of my own body, descending with graceful precision toward the waiting ground. What I couldn't know, was that Danny Brooks had one final card to play, evidence that would transform my act of defiance into something far more significant than personal redemption. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of testimony and evidence in the base's briefing room. General Michaels and senior officers reviewed Danny's footage showing Thornton making unauthorized adjustments to the Coleman, adjustments that would have given him an advantage while potentially compromising safety. When confronted, Thornton's arrogance finally cracked. The modifications were minor, he insisted. Standard practice for experienced pilots. The excuse fell flat as Walsh contradicted him, detailing how Thornton had systematically falsified my evaluations. He told me it was necessary to maintain standards. Walsh admitted, unable to meet my eyes. Said that letting someone like Harper succeed would undermine the program's prestige. Lieutenant Alvarez corroborated this with her own investigation. There appears to be a pattern, sir, Alvarez reported, placing a data tablet before the general. Over the past 5 years, 28 candidates without family connections have seen their scores manipulated. Emily Harper isn't an isolated case. She's just the first one who fought back effectively. Danny's final revelation truly shattered Thornton's remaining dignity. The incident that ended John Harper's flying career, the accident attributed to pilot error. Captain Thornton was the test engineer who signed off on the aircraft systems before that flight. Danny produced a faded incident report. The official record shows a control system failure that Harper supposedly should have anticipated. What it doesn't show is that Thornton had modified those same systems, modifications virtually identical to what he did to the Coleman yesterday. Is this true, Captain? General Michaels demanded quietly. Thornton's silence was answer enough. The general turned to me. Miss Harper, while your methods today were unorthodox, you have exposed a serious breach of ethics within our training program. Your father was an exceptional pilot whose career was cut short by circumstances that now appear to warrant further investigation. Captain Thornton was immediately relieved of command, his demonstration officially recorded as compromised by equipment irregularities, while my flight was noted as an unauthorized but technically proficient display. The general directed a full review of all cadet evaluations from the past 5 years, with Walsh appointed to the Oversight Committee, a redemption that would ensure fairness for future candidates. Most significantly, Michaels personally rescinded my dismissal, reinstating me with a probationary period under Alvarez's supervision. From his breast pocket, the general withdrew a small velvet box. John Coleman Harper was posthumously exonerated last year. The evidence was compelling enough to warrant a formal apology and restoration of his service record. He opened the box, revealing a Distinguished Service Medal. This belongs to your family. I'd planned to mail it, but it seems fitting to present it in person. I accepted it with trembling hands, tears blurring my vision. He never talked much about his military service, I said softly. I think it hurt too much knowing people believed he'd failed. General Michaels nodded. These wings weren't clipped by failure. They were buried by silence. You made them fly again. 6 months later, I stood on the same tarmac where my journey had nearly ended. The morning sun painted the sky gold and pink as I watched F-22's taxi toward the runway. At my side stood Danny, his face creased in a proud smile. I touched the lieutenant's bars on my uniform, a commission earned after completing my probationary period with distinction. The investigation into Thornton's conduct had rippled through the entire Air Force training structure, uncovering systemic biases that had persisted for decades. Thornton himself had been dishonorably discharged. Under General Michaels' supervision, the Academy had implemented new transparent evaluation protocols designed to identify talent regardless of background. Later that afternoon, as I guided the Coleman through the sky, executing intricate patterns with fluid precision. I felt my father's presence strongly. The silver wings gleamed on my chest as I showcased both the aircraft's capabilities and my own extraordinary talent. G-forces pressed me into the seat as I entered a tight turn, sweat beading on my brow, despite the climate-controlled cockpit, physical sensations anchoring me in the moment. This was real, earned through struggle and vindication. Far below, officials watched with admiration, captured by the perfect harmony of pilot and machine. But my thoughts were elsewhere, on golden wheat fields and a rickety old biplane, on my father's patient voice. Feel the aircraft, Sparrow. Don't just fly it. Become it. As I completed my demonstration and brought the Raptor into a graceful descent, I whispered, "This is for you, Dad." The Coleman responded as if it understood, as if the aircraft recognized the rightness of a Harper at its controls. When my wheels touched down with characteristic perfection, I knew I had found my place in the world, not just as John Harper's daughter, but as a pilot whose skills had earned her the right to touch the sky on her own terms. The journey had been filled with obstacles that might have broken a less determined spirit, but as my father had taught me, no one can clip your wings if you believe in your own strength. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.